I was at the cinema when I noticed a man staring at me from the back row. It was a quiet evening, and the old cinema was almost empty, with just a handful of people scattered around. I picked a seat in the middle, ready to enjoy the film. As the lights dimmed and the previews started, I felt a prickling sensation, like someone was watching me. I glanced around and spotted him. He was sitting alone in the back row, his eyes fixed on me. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe he was just zoning out or something. But every time I glanced back, he was still staring. As the movie started, I tried to focus on the screen, but it was hard to shake the feeling of being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, and each time, the man was still there, his gaze never wavering. It was unsettling, but I told myself to stop being paranoid. Halfway through the film, I decided to move seats, hoping to lose his line of sight. I got up and moved closer to the front. For a while, it seemed to work. I started to relax and enjoy the movie again. But then I saw a shadow moving in the aisle. I looked back and saw the man, now sitting a few rows behind me. My heart started to race. Why was he following me? I tried to focus on the movie, but my mind was spinning with possibilities. Towards the end of the film, the screen flickered and a strange message appeared. It was brief, just a few seconds, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. The message read, "I see you." The screen quickly returned to the movie, but I was frozen in my seat. I looked back and the man was gone. I felt a surge of fear and decided to leave immediately. I rushed out of the cinema, my heart pounding. Outside, I looked around but saw no sign of him. I hurried to my car and drove home, feeling a mix of fear and confusion. The next day, I went to the cinema and spoke to the manager about what happened. He looked puzzled and said there shouldn't have been any messages on the screen. He offered to check the film reel for any glitches. Later that week, the manager called me back. He said they found an old film reel that had been mistakenly spliced with the current movie. The message was part of a horror film from years ago, and it was just a creepy coincidence that it played when it did. I felt a bit relieved, but the memory of that man staring at me still haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a coincidence. I started to wonder if he had anything to do with it, or if it was all just a bizarre twist of fate. The experience left me wary of going to the cinema alone. I still think about that night, the feeling of being watched, and the unsettling message on the screen. It made me realize how easily routine activities can turn sinister, leaving a lasting impression of fear. Even though it was just a glitch, the coincidence was too eerie to forget. Now, every time I go to the movies, I can't help but glance around, checking for anyone watching from the back row. During the Black Friday rush, I felt someone's eyes on me the entire time. The mall was packed, and I was doing my best to navigate through the crowd. After grabbing some deals, I decided to take a break and catch a movie at the new cinema nearby my house. The cinema was surprisingly empty, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. I picked a seat in the middle, hoping to relax and escape the madness for a couple of hours. As the lights dimmed and the preview started, that uneasy feeling of being watched returned. I scanned the room but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Halfway through the movie, my phone buzzed with a text. Annoyed, I pulled it out to silence it, but the message caught my attention. It was from an unknown number and simply said, "I see you." I looked around, trying to spot anyone suspicious, but everyone seemed engrossed in the film. I tried to focus on the movie, but my mind kept drifting back to the text. Another buzz, another message. You can't hide. My heart raced. Was someone in the cinema watching me? I felt exposed, vulnerable. I decided to move seats, hoping to lose whoever it was. I settled into a new spot near the back, keeping my eyes on the exit. The movie continued, but I was too distracted to follow the plot. My phone buzzed again. Nice move, but I'm still here. Panic set in. I got up and left the theater, heading straight for the lobby. In the bright lights of the lobby, I felt a bit safer. I asked an employee if anyone had been acting strangely, but they hadn't noticed anything unusual. I decided to go home and try to figure out what was happening. Over the next few days, the texts kept coming. "Why did you leave? I'm closer than you think. I barely slept," constantly feeling like I was being watched. I contacted the phone company, but they couldn't trace the number. I even went to the police, but without any tangible threats, there wasn't much they could do. The breaking point came when I received a photo of my house, taken from the street. I was terrified. I installed security cameras and changed my routines, trying to shake the feeling of being stalked. Then, one evening, I got a call from a friend. He sounded embarrassed and apologized for a mix-up. Apparently, he had been trying to reach someone else with a similar number and didn't realize his mistake until he saw the panic in my texts. He swore the messages were a prank gone wrong and meant for someone else. A relief washed over me, but I was still shaken by the experience. The fear and paranoia I had felt were real, even if the threat wasn't. The anonymous texts were from a wrong number, but the impact on my life was profound. The whole ordeal taught me how vulnerable we can feel when we think we're being watched. It also made me realize the importance of communication and how easily misunderstandings can escalate. While I was relieved it wasn't a stalker, the experience left me wary and more cautious in my daily life. At the cinema, the movie stopped abruptly. It was a new cinema with few patrons, and I had gone to catch a late show. There were maybe 5 or 6 other people scattered around the theater. Just as the plot was getting interesting, the screen went black. A few seconds later, the house lights came on. We all sat there, confused. After a minute, an employee came in and apologized, saying there was a technical issue and they were working to fix it. He offered free passes to another show and suggested we wait in the lobby. I got up and made my way to the lobby, annoyed but curious about what was going on. As I waited, I noticed a door marked employees only slightly ajar. I glanced around and seeing no one was watching, I decided to take a quick look. I've always been a bit nosy, and I figured it couldn't hurt to see what was behind the scenes. The door led to a narrow hallway filled with old film reels and equipment. I wandered down the hall, hearing faint voices and the hum of machines. At the end of the hall, there was another door that looked older than the rest of the cinema, almost out of place. It was slightly open, so I pushed it further and stepped inside. The room was small and dusty, filled with boxes and old props. As I looked around, something caught my eye, a small, ornate box half hidden under a pile of papers. I picked it up and opened it. Inside were photographs and newspaper clippings. The photos were old, black and white, showing a family in front of a house. The clippings were about a series of disappearances in the 1950s, all linked to the same address. Curiosity piqued. I looked at the address. It was a place I knew well, an abandoned house not far from the cinema. I had passed it many times, always thinking it looked creepy and out of place in our modern town. I decided to investigate further. The next day, I drove to the abandoned house. The place was run down, with boarded-up windows and overgrown weeds. I parked a little way down the street and walked up to the front door. It was locked, but I found a window that was already broken and climbed inside. The interior was even worse than the outside, dusty, dark, and filled with old furniture covered in sheets. As I explored, I found more unsettling objects, children's toys, old clothes, and more photographs. It was like the place had been frozen in time. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, I found a trunk filled with personal items, letters, jewelry, and a diary. The diary belonged to a woman named Margaret. Her entries talked about strange occurrences and feeling watched. The last entry was the most disturbing. She wrote about hearing footsteps in the house and seeing shadows moving at night. Then, she and her family vanished. I decided to take the diary and some photos to the police. They were intrigued and opened a new investigation. A few weeks later, they called me to say they had found evidence linking the house to a series of murders. The abandoned house was a crime scene used by a serial killer who had never been caught. The discovery at the cinema led to solving a mystery that had haunted our town for decades. The technical glitch, the hidden room, and the abandoned house all came together to reveal a dark secret. It was unsettling to think how close we had been to such a sinister place, and how a simple trip to the movies had uncovered a chilling truth. That experience changed how I see everyday places. Now, I can't help but wonder what hidden stories lie behind the walls of seemingly ordinary buildings.